So first of all, a warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for giving me the honor of giving me your precious time. I've tried to make the last session as productive as possible for you. This time I've done the same. I've tried a little harder. The first episode that we did, I tried to cram a lot of content in one small webinar, and I felt that I haven't been able to do justice to a lot of the important points. So the intention this time is that I'll create a sort of a series out of this and focus on each individual food. If you remember last time I shared 7 foods for reflection. So I'll focus on one each time. As usual, a small warning before we start. What we're about to discuss are intangibles. So I will need your attention and your imagination, and wherever I'm falling short in explaining or getting my point across, I will need your help to use your intelligence as much as possible to try to understand what I'm saying. So if there are any limitations on my end, you will have to cover for them. And that's because of the nature of the discussion. One more thing, the philosophy that I've tried to use in this entire effort, in this entire initiative, is that there is tons and tons of inspiration available online. And with the COVID-19 scenario, it has exploded. But inspiration is good for certain times, but I believe that if you're pursuing learning in a certain area, then it works really well if you pursue education rather than inspiration. Inspiration comes and goes. Plus, the point of this philosophy, or the point of trying to follow this philosophy, is that I want people to be able to have enough blocks of value from my end that they can actually create their own value. They can bring more value to the entire learning. We'll start with a quick catch up on episode 1. I'll try to go fast. If I'm going too fast or too slow, please feel free to put it in the comment section, because this is supposed to be a very quick catch up. But I've taken quite a few slides from the last presentation. So we started last time by me trying to justify your time, even though you've already decided to give it to me. I started by saying that I'm a creative strategist. I don't consider myself an expert or a guru or a ninja or in any such capacity. What I believe is that I've had a very eventful professional life, fortunately, and I've come across a lot of things that I believe I can share ahead that have been shared with me. I've been part of 2 startup successes. I've headed office for some of the world's largest organizations in the communication industry. I've started 4 companies successfully, and I failed 2 startups also. I've worked for over 70 power brands. Besides being part of startup companies, this also has created a lot of powerful, wonderful experience for me. Brands have spent over $100 million on ideas that I came up with. And as I said last time, if I'm still walking around alive, I believe most of them were not wasted. I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing team members with whatever country I was in. We've broken about 9 world records. We've won some FA awards. I was chosen as one of the global top 20 at DTB. I was recently considered among the top 20 entrepreneurs in GCC by a gentleman. Hats off to him for it. But the most important reason why you should be listening to me is that I've had the pleasure of working with some amazing, amazing people. And that is what I'm trying to channel into whatever I am sharing ahead. And I hope it is of value to people. Some quick context also was shared last time. The context remains the same here, which is the elephant in the virtual room, COVID-19. I will not go into a lot of detail, but all I'll say is that last time I made a case that things will stay the same, but faster. That is the same assumption that I'm working with today. What impact will it have on what we are talking about today? Success will always be dependent on ROI, but in this case, it's going to be on return on ideas because of increased competition, because of the changing marketplace, because of trends that were supposed to happen, which will now happen faster. My mindset, even today it is the same. It was last time, it was the same. I am talking to high performers. This is what I believe. And my mindset is going to be to provide some bit of coaching to them. So I am not going to do the heavy lifting. I'm just sharing ahead whatever I think I know well. And the heavy lifting is obviously at the audience's end, where they now can take this and choose what to do with it. Last time I shared 7 foods of reflection. The first was that creativity is knowledge plus imagination. This is the one we'll be focusing on today also. Now, when I was talking about this, one point that I wanted to make was that since I'm talking to high performers, I'm talking to people who are experienced and who are trying to make the best of whatever creative challenges they're facing every day, the knowledge part is quite clear to them. So the case I was making was that how much to know when you're faced with a creative challenge. And the suggestion, the point I made was that enough to synthesize and not analyze. I'm not going to go into detail right now, but once we're done with the catch-up, then this is all we'll talk about today. The second food was that ideas are not the most important thing. The point I was trying to make here was that it's very important to understand the context in which you are operating against a challenge where creativity is needed. And the thing that we understood last time was that the timing and the team that is behind your entire initiative. It could be just you also. But that's more important than the idea. But the idea in itself is even more important than the business model or even funding how much you have. So in other words, very nicely, Victor Hugo put this with an idea whose time has come. The third food was that creativity is not optional. And here I made an entire case with an example that the Eurostar was made faster by 25 minutes in a 3-hour journey by spending $10 billion. And what if someone had tried to be more creative, would they have been able to save most of this money and still create value for the passengers, which at the end of the day was the goal of saving 25 minutes. Also, the argument I made was that creativity is not optional because of scarcity, and ideas are virtually the only thing that we can say is an infinite resource that we have. The fourth food was that creativity weighs 3 pounds. This was a clever pun on the idea that a human brain weighs 3 pounds on average. So mindset is everything. And here I went through an example that some of the most creative people who are jazz players, when scientists put brain scanners on their minds, they realized that self-censoring and inhibition, parts of the brain that are responsible for that, these gentlemen had the ability to switch them off. So the point I was trying to make with this example was that the opposite of a creative mindset is not a rational mindset. It is a fearful or inhibited mindset. Then I tried to create some analogies to help everyone understand this. So what mindset are we not supposed to be in? Do not be a detective. Don't try to solve problems. Do not create to create. You're not an artist. Especially, I'm talking from a business context, and this is the context for the entire conversation. Rather, try to be a discoverer. The food 5 was that there is a method to this madness. There are a lot of their methods out there. The one that I tend to use and have found very useful is the right brainstorm techniques. And I put forward 7 rules of doing brainstorm right. I will not get into details of the rules right now. This entire presentation that I made last time is available on LinkedIn in an article format also. If you can go to my profile, you can find it easily. Food number 6 was the happiness test. And the argument that I was trying to make was that most success, and because of COVID-19, because of the future getting to us faster, this becomes even more important. Most success lies between telling the difference between a good idea from a great idea. A lot of people can do bad idea versus good idea. Good to great is where the real value is, where the real differentiation is. And one way of doing that I have found is to do the happiness test. One watch out here was that the most fundamental human truth is people want to be at a better, happier happiness level than they were before interacting with whatever you're trying to create, whether it's a product, whether it's a company, whether it's a service. But the key thing here was that when you put the happiness test, you need to make sure that you isolate yourself. That's because research shows that as human beings, we are horrible at predicting our own behavior. to stimulus that has not yet occurred. So if you try to build on that, it rarely ever ends well. The last food was where I highlighted some common pitfalls. I mentioned that there are more than 50 cognitive biases that are already that scientists already know, but those that I have in my experience or in my learning from other experts seen most common are these three, not invented here, which means that if we did not come up with the thought, chances are we will assign it a biased value. Falling in love with an idea or a bunch of ideas prematurely, or focusing on the man behind the plan rather than what the idea is. So this brings us to the end of the first section, which is a catch-up. I wanted to schedule a small mini question and answer session here. So if there are any questions about what the last episode was, this is a good time to be talking about it, because all the 7 foods are open for discussion right now. Moving forward, we'll be talking about the first one. So if there are any questions, the comment section or the Q&A section are both there. You can ask me any questions. Okay, I see that there are no questions. So I will now jump into the meat of the section. I can see that some people have joined us just now. So I'll just do a very, very quick sum up. For those who've just joined us, this is episode 2 of Enhance Your Creativity with Ali Zafar webinar series. In the first episode, we went through 7 foods for reflection for high performers who are facing creative challenges every day. Today, we are going to focus on the first one only. And if I can find the discipline in me and the time, I intend to continue doing webinars on each one of them. The core is to focus on education, not inspiration. So if you missed the first part of this discussion, the entire first episode is on LinkedIn. And even if you don't want to watch the video, it's available in article format also on my profile. You can find it very easily. Now we come to episode number 2. So what I've tried to do is, this is a quote I shared last time also, which is around engagement. I am a true believer of this. And what I've tried to do this time is to make sure that I engage the audience. So if you guys are right now listening, make sure your comments section, the feature is open, and you can access it anytime. And I was doing some testing. One easy way of doing that is that do not watch this webinar in a full screen mode. If you get out of full screen mode, it'll be easier for you to keep watching and looking at the chat section in parallel. Because what follows is a series of questions. So I will be engaging the audience a lot more this time. So the first episode that we did, I tried to feed your thinking. But in this episode, what I'm going to do now is to try to put it to the test, your thinking, I mean. So as I said, the chat section is your friend. Just keep it handy. We'll focus on food 1 today. Now, a quick question to start with, and I want as many of you who would like to answer this in the chat section. What was food 1? Well, it's an easy question. I just went over it right now. If you really try to look for it, I don't think you'll find it. But anyone, what was the first food? Okay. Excellent. Excellent. I just got a response. I don't know if everyone can see it or not, but it's brilliant. Happy to see it. Creativity is knowledge plus imagination. This is what our entire conversation today will be about. And this is, it's a big intangible among intangibles. So it's a bit of a challenge for me to do justice to it, but I will try my best. But as I said earlier, I will need your full support in making this time most productive for you guys. So the knowledge part is easy, right? You're all high performers. You understand that. So what I will attempt to do now is to make a case for synthesis and make a much richer discussion around it, so that we don't just walk away with this one lesson that, okay, we should synthesize more than analyze, but a deeper understanding of how a process of synthesis can work best based on some other experts, not just me, and some research that has happened. Just a quick recap on what I mean when I say analysis versus synthesis. Analysis is a breakdown of an intellectual whole into parts or components. It is a very useful tool. It is a very useful thing to do in certain situations. The argument I'm making is that when you are up against a creative challenge, synthesis is way more useful, because what it does is it helps you combine separate elements to form a coherent whole. When you are up against a creative challenge, you do not intend to jump to the right answer. That's not what you should be looking for. What we should be looking for is creating educated point of views, multiple of them, so that they can then be pitched against each other or help you in creating powerful ideas. Another question. Who here has read or heard of this? The Medici effect. It's a book published by Harvard Business School, written by Mr. Franz Johansson. It was listed as a top 10 business book by Amazon and translated into 18 different languages. It's a more recent one. So I've built on this a lot. So it's actually kind of good if you haven't read it. So has anyone read this or heard of it? A no is a perfectly acceptable answer, by the way. Okay, so I believe a lot of people haven't really heard of this or had the chance to go through it. Okay, now before I get into what I want to explain here, a quick question. Okay, and this one I would really like everyone to answer in a yes or no. Right, so it's a simple question. Expertise and logic in a profession, expertise in a profession that you are right now trying to find a creative innovation in. How critical is it? Is it critical or is it not? So it's a yes or no question. Is expertise and logic among critical factors in creating innovation or not? Okay. So a lot of people think that it is. Uh, it's interesting because I'm going to make a point that it is not. So this should be fun for you. Okay. Now, before we move ahead, I'm sure those of you who are closer to my age remember this firsthand, and those of you who are younger probably have seen this. So this is what cell phones used to look like, and this is what cell phones do look like, right? The ones on the right are five different brands from five different companies. And look at the ones on the left. They are pretty much from the same company, with a few exceptions. Right now, imagine this. It's one of the largest markets right now, mobile technology. If not the largest or the most dominant. But there's barely any differentiation right now in the design and the features. If you find any innovation right now uh, in the mobile market, it's usually software led. I'm right now focusing on hardware, so I'm talking about the Apples and the Huawei's and the Xiaomi's of the world. Why is it so? Because unless you are either an enthusiast or or someone who's very brand loyal, you can pick up a device and pick up another device which is half the price, and you will barely be able to tell any difference. Barely. So that's how bad it has got. And the context to this is that expertise and logic are at an all-time high. Right? Apple has revolutionized the game, and everyone now knows what they do. Apple phones are made in China. Everyone knows what goes inside an iPhone. So expertise and logical thinking that okay, if this is what what has made Apple successful, if this is what has made Samsung successful, what is the next logical thing to do? These things are right now. Knowledge of these things is at an all-time high. But what happened to the innovation then? Why does every piece of cell phone technology right now, whether it costs 200 reals or whether it costs $1,200, pretty much looks like a glass slab and pretty much has the same features. The only differentiation is the focus on one or two of the features. The way I would like to see this, and I would like you to see this, is this is what is happening. So I was reading a book. It's called A Short History of Nearly Everything. If any one of you has read it, I'm sure you will understand my fascination with it. And those of you who haven't, it's a must read. A Short History of Nearly Everything. That's what it's called. So what I found out was that in the early 1900s, scientists used to believe that all major scientific discoveries that were supposed to be made have already been made. And it was increasingly difficult and depressing for people who were really excited and enthusiastic about the sciences to take it up as a career, because they expected that no big breakthrough was now expected, and I will not be able to make any big uh, successes. So I'm going to be a failure. So imagine people who are still following and still pursuing scientific discovery were doing it purely out of passion, because the general consensus was there's barely anything left to discover. So in this context, my question now is, who is innovating the most in mobile phone tech these days? And here's a hint. Right? These are people who apparently lacked the expertise to do original work. The Chinese or the Korean or the second, third grade. But that is where the next innovation is coming. They might not be usable devices right now. They might be overpriced right now. But one thing that all uh, tech futurists are talking about, strongly of the opinion, that the next big revolution in the mobile tech is going to be in hardware, not in software. The question again to you guys, and please answer yes or no. Okay, it's going to be 4 or 5 questions, so I'll give a few seconds on each slide. What I want you to do is look at each slide and then say yes or no to the question, which is that did the person have expertise and did logical things to succeed in each scenario. So Reed Hastings and Netflix, right? There's a small hint underneath it. Okay, it's not small, it's a big hint. Right? This guy had a bachelor's in mathematics. He was in the Peace Corps. He used to teach math. And then he decided to go to Stanford and then start Netflix. You think he had the expertise? Yes or no? Was he doing the logical thing according to his path? Yeah, so yes or no answers. Okay. Okay. And yeah, so it was logical to him. Some people are saying that he had the expertise, some are saying they're not. Yeah, exactly. So logic and expertise have taken over in a lot of cases. So let's look at another example. This guy, right? It's almost a cliche now, but still at the risk, because he's done amazing stuff in the world, I'll say the same thing. So you think he did the logical thing or not? Okay, I won't wait for your answers. Just keep the answers coming. I'll go forward because I want to finish within the time we have for the webinar. Okay, here's another guy. This is a very interesting case. Jeff Bezos with Amazon. You think he had expertise and he uh, did the logical things with Amazon? Now, a lot of people would say, and this is what I was of the opinion when I was going through this and I was looking for these references, that this guy spent enough time on e-commerce, he dedicated enough and he learned enough that yes, you can say that maybe at the beginning of Amazon, where it was just a book store, he did not have the expertise and he wasn't doing the logical things. But later on, after 4 or 5 years, he did have the expertise and he was doing logical things. Yeah, so it kind of makes sense when you look at it like that. But then I look at this. Okay, this is what Amazon is busy doing right now. None of this looks logical to me, to be honest. You do not pick a fight with the top 5 giants standing in line next to you. But they're doing that. But they're not stopping there either. They are picking fights with their suppliers also, people who are there, who they are dependent on. They are picking fights with and joining forces with everyone. So there is a lot of experimenting going on there. And that is kind of the argument that I'm trying to make, the bigger argument. I'm not saying that expertise and logic is not important or it should be discarded or creativity should be mindless or pointless. That is not at all the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that there is a time and place and there is priority. To make this point, let me give you another example. Okay, who knows this guy? And everyone does. So Michael Jordan, he used to practice more than 6,000 practice shots each week when he was practicing. Okay, so expertise, if this guy didn't have the expertise in basketball, no one did. And if this guy wasn't doing the next logical thing, working hard, obtaining mastery of basketball, then I don't know who was. So this question I don't want to answer. This is a rhetorical question. Why is there a difference? When you look at business leaders and success scenarios, they are not spending 6,000 attempts a day for weeks or whatever. But in sports, whether it's Michael Jordan or whether it's someone else you look at, somehow there is a difference. Their approach fundamentally differs. So the point to note here is, before I make my point, measurements of a basketball court have hardly ever changed. The rules of the game have hardly ever changed in basketball, in tennis, in golf, in any sport you can pick up, including Formula One. There are changes, I'm sure, every year. There are regulations that are implemented, but no fundamental change is there. So it won't be wrong to say that when Nokia was king, they were the Michael Jordan of mobile phones. They had all the expertise. They know exactly how to make kick-ass devices. But then the rules of the game changed. Someone changed the size of the court that they were playing in. Someone changed the time of the game that they were playing. Someone changed every rule. And it didn't just change. A chain reaction of change started. Now, this is a question to all of you. And I would like as many people to try to answer as possible. Why did Nokia fail, in your opinion? I'm not looking for long answers. Just one line, one point. First thing that comes to you. Why do you think Nokia failed? As you think about your answers, let me tell you what this guy used to think. This guy is the CEO of Nokia. He said we didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost. So in other words, what he was saying was, we had the expertise and we took the logical next steps, but we don't know why we still did not succeed. So what he's saying is that clearly we didn't change. That's interesting to think about it like this. Yep. Some members are saying that the failure seems logical to people not picking up on opportunities. Yes, exactly. And I'm sure I've taken this one small quote from Mr. Elon. I'm sure he is way smarter than I am, and I'm sure he's figured it out. But the point that I'm trying to make is he figured it out in hindsight. And hindsight is always 2020. When you are up against a creative challenge, that's where you need to understand what's happening. So the point I'm trying to make with this entire long argument is this. When the rules keep changing, or there is an opportunity to change the rules, there is the opportunity to be creative and be innovative. So Apple did not do what they did. Google did not do what they did. Samsung did not do on their own. Nokia laid all the ground for them. They were just smart enough, and I'm speaking purely from a creative challenge perspective, not from a technology or other perspective. From a creative challenge perspective, what they did was they left the room open for others to come in and change the rules. And that's exactly what happened. Now, just to drive this point home, one last argument here. On the next slide, you will see the logo of a company. I want you to tell me, what do you think this company started as? When they started this company, what was the purpose of this company? Will you be surprised to know that YouTube was supposed to be a dating site? The whole idea behind it was that people will upload their videos and others will either like them or unlike them. And it obviously wasn't picking up. So the parts of the YouTube success story that you find mostly on the internet, if you search for it, they will not talk about those failures that they feel are irrelevant. Because when you're writing a success story, your opinion determines how you tell that story. And most people's opinion is that the wrong decisions that they made did not contribute in any way. It was only the right decisions that they were making that contributed to the success. This is the fallacy, huge fallacy. So now, what this brings us to is the third section of this and the last section of this webinar. What I've done is I've gone through a lot of content from Franz Johansson, the same guy I just showed you the book of. And I've sort of summarized his lessons. And I've tried to put in my own opinion as well. But since this is research-based and it's so well articulated, I didn't have to do much, to be honest. The first lesson that he tries to put forward is always look for opportunities to change the rules of the game. Now, this is easy to understand right now because we just saw a couple of examples. We spoke about some people who have already been doing it. But still, let me ask you a quick question. How big is the video gaming industry in your opinion? A, 55 billion, B, 130 billion, C, 150 billion. And just to, as a hint, the film industry right now is 140 billion. So A, B, or C? Let me know. What do you think? Okay. So a lot of people are saying B. And I think I have mastered the art of deceptive advertising because this film industry number was there to create an anchor. It's actually 150 billion. So it's way larger than the film industry. Imagine that. Another question for you is, how much money did the highest selling movie of all times make? Now, this research obviously is from the internet. So if I make a few mistakes here and there, please excuse me for that. Because the accuracy of the example is not supreme. It's the point that I'm trying to make. The argument still holds, even if the numbers are a little here and there. So yeah, coming back to the question. How much money did the highest selling movie, Avengers Endgame, how much money do you think it made? Okay, since I haven't given you any choices, it's a hard one. So before you Google it and find it, let me answer it. So Avengers Endgame made about $2.79 billion. It's billion with a B. Okay, it beat Avatar. But now, to put it in perspective, look at this. The entire Avengers franchise has made $13 billion, which is a huge success in its own uh, pace. But this guy, yeah, Mario, he's made $38 billion. Does that make any sense? I know Umar is here in the audience. He's probably smiling right now. He's always trying to give me examples of of the gaming industry, and I pretend I don't care. You want to know the reason behind this? I think this is the reason. Okay, now probably some of you are thinking that if the point I'm trying to make is that there's not enough creativity happening in the movie industry, then I probably don't watch enough movies. So if that's your argument, you're absolutely right. But that is not the point I'm trying to make. Okay. What I'm showing you here are not game titles. What film industry has been innovating with or being creative with is not the fundamental rules of filmmaking. They've just been doing it over and over again with new ideas. But when you look at the gaming industry, it is marked with blood of all those console makers, of all those uh, companies that tried to change the rules of the game. Those of you who are close to my age can recognize most of these devices, starting from the Atari to the Sega 2, and so on. And it is not coincidence that today only three of them survive as big players. And the fourth one is mobile gaming. So there is PS, there is Xbox, there is Nintendo, and then there is mobile gaming. And each one of them has a huge, huge sum of people and money now backing it up. But we did not get here easily. So now that I've made my point around changing rules, that's the first lesson. A quick question. What rule do you think Uber and Kareem have changed? Comment section, please. What is the rule or the rules that they've changed? Yep, I think Hamza got it. But it's kind of in a different way. I'll put it in a different way. The rule that you've been taught since you were a child is don't let strangers in your car. Now, what Kareem and Uber say is, go look for strangers who would like to sit in your car. The next question now becomes easy. Okay. What rule do you think Airbnb is changing? I'm cheating now, so everyone should be able to answer this. Don't let strangers in your home. Right. Right now, obviously, Uber, Kareem, Airbnb, and all similar businesses because of COVID-19 are under duress. But no one can deny the fact that they changed the rules of their game and they won big. And even if Uber or Kareem, God forbid, they go away right now because of the pandemic, the way they've changed the world will last. This brings us to the second lesson. Second lesson is find inspiration from industries or cultures other than yours. Just so that you guys get the most bang for this content, just keep in mind the entire context that we've been talking about. And the reason I keep bringing that up again and again is that this is a presentation and linear logic has its own pros and cons. So the entire context here is When we are out to solve creative challenges, we believe that expertise and logic are our biggest friends. That is not entirely true. Because what you need to see is, are the rules up for change? If the rules are up for change, then these lessons are your best friends. So the second lesson is, if you can break the rules, or you can modify the rules, or you can play around with them, how do you do that? What do you go about? What is the synthesis you do with this information? One easy way of getting to that synthesis that I was talking about, rather than an analysis, is find inspiration from industries or cultures other than yours. It could be an organization culture that you're talking about. Now, another question for you guys. What comes to your mind when I say Nike? In one word or in one sentence, what comes to your mind when I say the word Nike? Will it be wrong if I say big superstar athletes and expensive advertising? Exactly. So just do it, because just do it has this attitude behind it. You don't expect nobody in a big time Nike. That's what this is built on. Powerful celebrities, but celebrities who are real, celebrities who are worth paying attention to. So big stars, big athletes. Now imagine you are not Nike, you are their minuscule competition, Under Armour. So Under Armour thought, wait, we don't have $1 billion to spend on advertising like Nike. So what do? What rule can we change? Hats off to them for the initiative that I'm about to show you. That what they realized was, what is the rule that we can change? What is the rule we cannot change? Sportswear athletics is fundamental. You cannot change it. You can't go with Kylie Jenner and expect it to work with the same audience that Nike does. So what the question they asked themselves was, can a ballet dancer be an athlete? And this is the answer. If I'm going to play a video, if you can't hear it, let me know.
Dear candidate, thank you for your application to our ballet academy. Unfortunately, you have not been accepted. You lack the right feet, turnout, Achilles tendons, and leg and torso length. You simply have the wrong body for ballet.
With your body, you could be a professional dancer in Vegas.
And at 13, you are already far too old to be considered.
Even those who have the body and the training.
Okay, so you probably figured it out. If you haven't, let me tell you, this is Misty Copeland. She is the first big star black ballet dancer. She obviously has a very interesting story. But Under Armour didn't just go and make an ad with it. They launched an entire line, a female sports athletic apparel line, and it's a huge success. It's a good example of changing the game, changing the rules of the game. Another very simple example is that there are some hospitals, and this is not a corona example, it's before that, earlier than that. Some hospitals get training and inspiration from Formula One teams to be able to work better together, because they understand that when lives are at stake, if the only rules that they try to follow are the rules and regulations of the hospital or the medical practice, they will never be able to go beyond them. Lesson 3. Create diverse teams to build, test, and execute ideas. A quick question. Who has read this or heard of this? It's a book. It's not just a book, actually. It's now a huge philosophy around, uh, I think, agile working. It's called Scrum. So if you haven't heard of it, do Google it, do check it out. It's not just a book, it's a way of working within teams. I will not get into it, but the point I'm trying to make here is that within the Scrum framework, which is proven to enhance speed and effectiveness and innovation within teams by many folds, not just once or twice, many folds. At the core of all of this is a Scrum team. And the essence of this Scrum team is that it is diverse. It cannot be from the same department. It cannot be from the same function. If there's not enough evidence, even our friends at Wall Street agree. Okay, lesson 4, the last lesson. This, I think, is the most fun one. Place more bets and double down on the ones that work. At least I didn't know this. I don't know how many of you knew this. Picasso made 50,000 pieces of art. He wasn't a very uh, high success rate guy. A lot of the work he's done is completely undervalued, has no value at all. It is lying in people's basements. It's just that he's become such a big brand that lose a piece of work because it's a Picasso is something people are going to buy. But he made 50,000 pieces of art. This is a very, very common example. I'm sure you've heard of this. Going back to our friend Michael Jordan, he missed 9,000 shots in games. He's lost 300 games. There are 26 game-winning shots that he missed. And that's why he succeeded. 250 papers. And most of them have 0 citations. So most of them were not found good enough by the scientific community to even cite in any other paper. This is one of the smartest people to have lived, at least in our times. More closer to home example, so to speak. Angry Birds' huge global success. It was the 52nd game that they made. Have you heard of the first 51? According to a story that I read, it's the team who was behind Instagram. They had sold off everything and they were almost broke. And their plan was to make to make big successful apps. So they tried one, it didn't work. They tried another, it didn't work. And they gave up on the 13th. And then one of them said, listen, I can't find a job, so I'm going to try one more time. And that was Instagram. And the rest, as they say, is history. So to sum up, what I've tried to do today is give you a little bit more mental practice of how to look at different pieces of information and focus on trying to synthesize it rather than analyze it. I've tried to give you some tips, proven tips and techniques from some experts who have figured it out to some extent. And I've tried to put it all together in a way where you can make sense of this and take this as a building block and now build your own experience out of it. So with this, the session comes to end from my end. Fortunately, I've managed to finish it in some amount of reasonable time. We have now a few minutes for question and answers if anyone has any. If you would like to speak, just raise your hand, or you can ask me questions in the comment section or the question and answer section. So we'll give it another 4 minutes for anyone to think of any questions. while you think of questions, what I'll do now is in a few days, I'll be uh, turning this episode also into a written article. So it's easier for people to go through it or summarize it or keep it as a reference and to see the different examples and the sections that I've shared. And I'll be putting it on LinkedIn. So if you are interested, just stay tuned on LinkedIn and it will appear on my profile in a few days. So if there are no questions, I would like to thank you everyone again for the honor and for the time. And I would like you all to promise that once you get out of this webinar, a feedback survey will open up. So do kindly fill it. If you don't do it now, I'm pretty sure the time will never come because you all have very busy lives. So I see that we don't have more questions. So either I haven't been able to intrigue you guys enough or I've done an amazing job. I would like to think it's the latter. So anyways, thanks again, everyone, and happy thinking.